How's it going, everyone? I am, as you can see, you guys have had actually probably a good minute to read through that, so I'm going to go through it really quick. I'm a lead front-end developer at MindGroup. It's an ad agency. I am historically a full-stack developer, but now I focus primarily on front-end. I am also one of the San Diego JS co-organizers. Say hi to your friends. So just to get started, I'm just going to go over a quick little demo, quick little walkthrough of the import and export functionality, the import-export keywords of the ES 2015 spec. None of this stuff is in browsers now. This is all stuff that if you wanted to use it, you'd have to use the transpiler, things like Babel or Tracer. But it works really well, and if you want to get ahead of the curve with regards to some of the things that are going to be showing up in browsers over the next year or two, Google MDN import or MDN export. Just read through that, which is, by the way, how I built this demo. So just jump right into it. It's code, yay code. So if any of you have worked with Node modules before, you know that you set module.exports to whatever you're exporting. So for example here, the old way on line 9 might say module.exports is equal to cat. In the ES 2015 export syntax, it would be export default cat. There is actually a lot of different ways of importing and exporting modules within ES 2015, but export default is probably going to give you the closest to the way that CommonJS currently works. So if we load up this guy, and then here's a demo file just so you guys know what's going to happen. I'm basically going to import that cat module that I defined, so import default cat, which just means that by default, whenever I import this module, that's what is exposed. Then in a module where I'm going to use it, I call that same cat function that I created. So import cat module, new mittens, and then when I run it, oh, actually that's pretty small. How's that look? Pretty good? Demo. Mitten says meow. Okay, no big deal. Pretty contrived example. It's mainly just showing you what default export looks like and what importing that module looks like. So if you're doing anything already inside of Node, you're already running through transpilers, you can switch over to this relatively easily. It's not a lot of painful transition. So on to the next thing. We have 3 demos total, you can see. Let's look at vehicle actions. So here is a module that is just a collection of really useful simple functions. Obviously very contrived, but you can see how you could maybe collect a number of different functions that you want to contain in one module. So this is the vehicle actions module, and I'm going to expose the go and the stop methods or functions. That would then get used in something like a vehicle without engines. So in here at the top, I am importing the go and the stop function. You notice it looks very much like the vehicle action. So if I export a go and a stop, I can import those same ones, go and stop, from the vehicle actions module. I then use those to create a bike and a trike, and then I export those two. Right? So pretty much just recursively showing you this is what the export looks like. Pretty simple to get a bunch or just one thing out of a module. Then to actually use it, we have a asterisk, import asterisk as simple vehicles from vehicles without engines. So now instead of importing things by name, I just have access to everything and it's all locked up inside of simple vehicles. I can then run it. You can see it's used here just to make a bike, and if I run that, it looks like this. Timmy's bike goes squeak, squeak, watch out where you're going, and then they have a bad time. Somebody cries to mom. All right, so the last step is to just show you that same vehicle's actions, but used in a slightly more complicated system. So this is an automobile. Just as before, I'm using import, go, and stop. Now this is interesting because I created internally for my module, I called it an automobile. That's what it is, but I expose it as a car, And then when I run it, I'm going to skip over the demo because of time. You can see Herbie and the Batmobile race, and Batmobile is. Any questions? Go ahead.
Okay, I have a few questions, but I'm not going to take over all that. But first question is...
Hi guys, I'm Rob Kaufman. I'm one of the founders of Learn and also a software consultant, and I am not here to talk about my code school. If you would like to discuss that, I would love to chat with you afterwards, but right now we're going to talk about Polymer. As many of you probably know, there is a new web framework born every minute, and a new one dies quiet death every 5 minutes. And Polymer is one of the newer kids on the block. And it happens to be one that I actually like, which if you've talked to me in the past, you'll know I'm pretty curmudgeonly about the state of JavaScript web frameworks. So let's talk about what Polymer is. Polymer is web components. The big focus of Polymer was to strip away some of the complexity that many of the other frameworks have sort of grown into and are bringing these days. And it kind of is a polyfill or maybe a shim or a library that brings what will be the future of web components to the browser today. It's IE 10 plus compatible. It works in all recent versions of Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. It works in Opera. Your crazy side browser that hasn't been updated in 3 years probably isn't going to work in. But anything that's relatively recent, right, so you're not going to roll this out in an app for a Fortune 500 pharma company, but for the majority of us, it works in all of the browsers that we're really seeing actual users using. It's built by Google. As many of you may wonder at this moment, why does Google have multiple competing JavaScript web frameworks? That's a great question, and I'm sure that the management would love to figure that out at Google. But the Polymer team came out of the Chrome dev team mostly because they wanted a way to experiment with the web component specs, because they wanted that spec to be spectacular, and it's really hard to write a specification if there are no known implementations. And so this is sort of where they started. Since then, it has gone on to be used in several pretty mainstream projects. Polymer runs the Google Translate. The current version of Google Translate is all in Polymer. And their Google Inbox is also got quite a bit of Polymer happening under the hood. So this is a real project that has some legs. It's also been seeing broader and broader adoption. It just reached 1.0 at the end of this last year. The thing I really like about Polymer is this idea of a component-based structure and the sort of simplified one-way binding. One-way binding is really trendy right now. And I thought that it might be really good for those in the audience to sort of compare it to what it's not. AngularJS is a full stack framework that's really designed for full stack is at least in the browser. Like, it comes with a router, it comes with the controllers, it comes with services, and two-way data binding, which has turned out to be kind of a snarly mess, which has led us to Angular 2, which simplifies things with one-way binding, has fewer types of components, and is sort of coming on the scene. Polymer doesn't have currently even a router, right? Like, it's a very simplified, it's meant to be used with existing applications. Whether that's a Rails application or a Python or a Django application or a like Express type style JavaScript application, like, it really plays nice with its neighbors. And you can actually intermingle Polymer components into many of these other types of applications, which turns out to be really powerful. Ember is a really fully featured, very opinionated stack, which can be great if you're building a single page app and doing that design from end to end, but it's really hard to shoehorn into any kind of existing infrastructure. Like, you either do Ember or you do nothing. And again, Polymer really tries to distinguish itself by being much more of a mix and match. In fact, that Polymer team has worked really hard to make it so that the web components built in Polymer can be used inside of an Ember app. And then React and Flux are sort of also new kids on the block. They're sort of the same generation, if you would, of Polymer. And they have the similar sort of design constraints and design styles. The big thing about Polymer apps is they tend to be more self-contained than a React app, whereas you get components that are sort of spread out in a bunch of files, and a React app is, a Polymer app is more contained. Let's look at some code. So here we have a Polymer module. Typically, they're divided up into 3 parts. There's the styles up at the top, the HTML template part, and the JavaScript part. You can break these up into multiple files by including them really simply, so that you get all 3 files living together in a directory. But fundamentally, the idea is that every Polymer component is these 3 things. So if you're building a map, the style for the map, the HTML template for the map, and the JavaScript from the map all live together as a component, and they move from app to app as a component. And then using that component is just a matter of including it in your HTML.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yep.
Rob, can you do like, with React Rails, you could do like server-side rendering of the components? Can you do something?
I'm gonna let him run.
Oh no.
Although if you get out of control, I'm going to throw both hands up and everybody's going to clap downstairs. So.
Deal.
Hello, my name is Gus. I am a JavaScript developer. A bit about my background is I am self-taught. I work here at Zito, just started a month ago, so that's pretty nice. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about Node and shipping it and getting it into production. Node is, a lot of people say Node is like great and awesome and it's really quick and fast, but then it comes time to like ship it and you're like, some assembly required. Like, what do you have to do to get this actually running on a server, right? So I'm going to talk about my experience with Node and how I've used it to deploy a few sites, specifically using DigitalOcean. So I'm going to cover setting up a server on Ubuntu using DigitalOcean, installing the proper tools, and then configuring your Node application so that it runs and doesn't crash every 5 seconds. I'm not going to cover how to create a Node application or any sort of domain configuration to point your fancy domain name at your new server. So goes without saying, your prerequisites are going to be an app you want to deploy, your domain name, some billing information, 3 to 5 hours, and whatever computer. OS doesn't matter. DigitalOcean makes it pretty easy to set up no matter what. So first thing you want to do is create a DigitalOcean account. The reason I chose DigitalOcean instead of something like Heroku is because they give you a whole virtual private server to mess with, so it's an entire instance of Ubuntu, like completely. Heroku gives you access to an instance of a process, which is great to get your apps up and running, but when you want to learn, which was my case, you want to have access to everything. There's a referral link at the bottom if you guys want to click it later. You get $10 credit. I need help me out. So, no shame, right?
Make that money.
I should mention that half the reason I did this was I was learning how to consolidate all my servers into one, and I'll show you that later. So creating a new droplet is as easy as choosing your OS, which in this case is Ubuntu, the cheapest size, and the closest data center. DigitalOcean allows you to add an SSH key, and this will prevent you from having to ever type in a password. It is a bit to set up if you're completely new to setting up servers and using the command line. If your Node experience is limited to just the tooling, you're going to have to get comfortable using the command line because that's the only way you'll access the servers from DigitalOcean. It's pretty simple. There's some guides, there's some links down there on how to do it with Windows and OS X. Yeah. So you'll add that in there. Create the droplet. You can create more than one. So here I'm setting a host name as well. And it takes like 5 minutes for them to boot up. No, not 5 minutes, sorry. 60 seconds is their claim to fame to boot up a new server. And then the first thing you're going to want to do is add a new user and not use root for everything. You have super high potential to break stuff if you're just installing everything on root and running everything on root. So if you follow the script on the right, like it's pretty quick and easy to just to create a basic user that still has sudo permissions, but isn't just going to mess everything up. Some of the nice things are that because it's just a virtual instance, if you do mess something up, you can just trash the whole thing, like just delete it on DigitalOcean and create a new one. You'll have to start over from scratch, although you haven't done too many steps by this point. And I would recommend naming the new user on your remote machine the same as your local one, so you don't have to type it in every time. Otherwise, when you connect to the remote machine, you'd be typing the command SSH Gus at whatever IP address. Instead, you could just do the IP address. another guide at the bottom there. And then you're just going to sign into your remote server that you have up and running. So the tools we're going to need are NVM. This one's critical for managing NVM manages Node itself. So there are lots of different versions of Node. There's a long-term support one, I think that's 4, and then there's the bleeding edge is 5. And this will allow you to install whichever one your application needs and make sure that any packages as well that you install are installed for that specific version. So if you install like gulp, it installs the gulp for Node 4, and then if you change versions, you have to install it again. But that way there's no conflicting packages between the different versions. Obviously you'll need Git to pull in your app or whatever versioning system you're using. So PM2, there was a talk on PM2, I think in December. It's a really great application that just keeps your Node instance alive and running. So if for whatever reason it crashes, it reports the crash and then tries to start it up again. After a while, it's not even going to try. And if you want to set up alerts to have it tell you when that happens, you can go into the configuration of PM2. I'm not going to go that deep into it today. It also has 2 cool modules that I like. It's log rotate and auto pull, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Rotates logs, and then the other one will pull down the latest changes from your Git branch. Okay, so this talk was originally going to be about Nginx, and then I realized I didn't have that much to say about it. So now I wrote this other thing, everything behind it pretty much. So Nginx is a web server, similar to Apache, and I know a lot of people would think like, why would you use Nginx? Isn't Node a web server? Nginx has its strengths. One of the strengths is setting up reverse proxies and load balancing. Reverse proxy is when 2 servers, like 2 different domains, like test.com and example.com, are sent to the same server, and you can use reverse proxy so that it's sent to the right application within the same server. So you can have 2 node instances running and 2 different domains pointing at the same box, but they still know where to go. And this is what I mean when I was like trying to consolidate. I was doing a lot of experiments in DigitalOcean. It was starting to cost me a lot of money, like $5 a month for just one experiment was a lot. So I started doing this reverse proxy to shove them all into one box and then have them all come into one instance of the virtual private server, reducing costs. It also has a basic load balancer, which I'll go over for a little bit. So commands from here on refer to the remote server only. So first thing you want to do, obviously, is pull down your application code into the var www directory. I don't know why that is. I'm self-taught, and I just do things that the blogs tell me to at some point. I couldn't find a good reason why it's there, but enough of them said it, so I said, must be best practice. You want to get your app running. You want to at least try to run it using regular Node. I had a lot of problems trying to get it started on PM2, and I found out I was missing a bunch of stuff, so probably just get it running locally and then remotely just using Node. Then once you have that, you can start it using PM2, using the PM2 start command, and that will make sure that it stays up and running all the time. And then you're going to want to add this file to Nginx. So on the top there, you'll see it's defining. Up here, you're defining your application and what port it's living at. And then down here, you're going to use it. The critical part is down here, proxy pass. So you're passing anything that matches that domain name to that specific instance. Also ran into some issues, like if you're running your Node application on port 8080 and your Nginx application at port 80, like couldn't you just hit port 8080 on the same IP? The answer is yes. So you have to specifically, you have to specify in Node to run the app only through the local host IP, which is this up here, 127.1 at the end. So the way you can, so once you have that file, you put it in sites available. There's a sites available folder within the Nginx directory. You just create a link to sites enabled, and Nginx just looks for all the config files in sites enabled and turns them on. You will have to reload after making any changes to make sure that Nginx picks them up. And then once you have all that set up, one thing I liked was engaging node balancing was pretty easy. all you have to do is define more server instances on different ports, and then specify what kind of algorithm you want it to like pass, or what kind of method you want it to do when passing it to different servers. So it defaults to round robin, so it just passes off to the next server. You can also have least connections, and this one, IP hash, will ensure that if a computer connects to one specific server for all subsequent requests, it'll connect to the exact same one. And that's good if you have sessions persisting on different servers. And that's it. Finally, you want to test your application, make sure it's up and running. There it goes. Let's see if we can get a game going. So this is my application. I'm working on a little fun game. Let's see if it... Oh, the volume's over here. But yeah, so this is running live at mobilemayhem.mithril.co. Any questions? Thank you.
Can you explain the round robin? I'm sorry, just the load balancing a bit more. So do you have to have? Are you running like PM2 clustered?
So you can run PM2 also has its own load balancing, right, where you can define different ports. So you can do it at either level. Here it's just you're defining a new server using its address basically. And round robin it just like picks the next server in order.
So
it doesn't
you're
do.
not running 3 separate processes, 3 separate node apps.
Yes, you are.
What? So who controls?
PM2 controls like whether the instances are running. So you would have to do the PM start command. Well, for this setup, you would have to do the PM start command 3 different times with different ports set.
Gotcha.
PM2 also has its own clustering. So, but the way PM2 does clustering isn't using ports. It actually checks how many processors you have, and you can do 1 instance per processor. So that's separate.
Gotcha.
Any other questions?
Just based off what you kind of was saying, I do pretty much everything you do with DigitalOcean and everything. But one thing I'm not familiar with is the whole upstream directive in Nginx. I'm completely unfamiliar with that. Is basically you can define any type of keyword and use that. Is it kind of like defining a DNS, like a namespace?
Yeah, you're defining your application up top at upstream, and you can use it at any point afterwards in the configuration file. There are several ways to do configurations in Nginx. So there's like a main configuration file. You can define all your things in there too, and then separately use them down the road.
But what I'm wondering is, I noticed you're using it almost like it's a domain that you're defining. Can you use that in any type of URL in Nginx? Or what?
Yeah, anywhere you would use an address. Yeah. Yes.
Do you use any tools for automating your deployments?
Not currently. Yeah, I was like, as I was writing this, I was like, you could probably script up this whole thing into one, even one big bash script. There are a lot of tools that can do this for you as well. There's one called Daku, which is a lot like Heroku, but you run it on your own DigitalOcean instance. So again, it does all this kind of stuff for you. I did this as a learning experience. Like, I wanted to see what was going on under the hood.
Just to know, I use Git for deployment. I don't know if that's a bad thing, but it's just me.
Any other questions?
Any more questions?